Rain poured mercilessly over the sleepy streets of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, each drop a reminder of nature's indifference to human suffering. Inside Rosewood Coffee House, an old establishment that had weathered decades of storms, Lily, Marie Carter wiped down the last table of her shift, her green eyes reflecting the dim vintage lights that had witnessed countless stories within these walls. The ancient ceiling fan creaked above, its slow rotation matching the rhythm of her exhaustion. At 24, Lily carried the weight of responsibilities far beyond her years. Her weathered cream sweater, picked up from a thrift store 2 winters ago, hung loose on her slender frame, and her worn boots had long since given up their waterproof promises. "You sure you don't want me to wait with you?" Harper Green called from behind the counter, her vibrant red curls bouncing as she counted the day's receipts. Harper's presence had always been a burst of color in Lily's monochrome world, from her bold tattoos to her infectious laugh. "I'll be fine," Lily responded, managing a tired smile. "Grandma needs her medication by 9, and I'm already cutting it close." Her fingers unconsciously traced the small, brave tattoo on her wrist, a ritual that had become as natural as breathing. The coffee house's warmth clung to her skin as she stepped into the rain, pulling her sweater tighter. The streetlights cast long shadows across the wet pavement, creating an ethereal glow that transformed ordinary puddles into mirrors of the night sky. Lily hugged her bag closer, its contents including a fresh bagel she'd saved for her grandmother's breakfast tomorrow. That's when she saw him. A figure sprawled on the sidewalk, his expensive suit soaked through, looking more like a fallen angel than a man. The streetlight caught the gold of his watch, a jarring symbol of wealth against the gritty concrete. He wasn't moving, but she could see the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Most people would have walked past. Most people would have called the police or pretended not to see. But Lily Marie Carter wasn't most people. Perhaps it was the same instinct that made her take in stray cats as a child. Or maybe it was the recognition of something broken that needed fixing, something she knew all too well. She approached carefully, her boots splashing in puddles that reflected fragments of neon signs from nearby stores. "Sir?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "Are you all right?" He stirred slightly, and when he lifted his head, Lily found herself staring into eyes that held storms of their own, steel blue-gray, unfocused yet haunting in their despair. The scent of expensive whiskey mingled with rain, telling a story of privilege and pain. "I'm fine," he slurred, attempting to sit up and failing. His blonde hair, darker from the rain, fell across his forehead in disheveled strands. "Just enjoying the weather." Lily glanced at her watch. 8:45 p.m. Her grandmother's medication was due in 15 minutes. She had a choice to make, and in that moment she made the one that would unknowingly alter the course of both their lives. "The coffee house is closed," she said, fishing out her keys. "But there's a back room with a heater and clean towels. You look like you could use both." She paused, studying his face. "And maybe some coffee. Or would you prefer someone who won't ask questions?" He looked up at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing through the rain for the first time. Something flickered in those stormy eyes. Recognition, perhaps, not of who she was, but of what she was offering. Understanding. Sanctuary. "Both," he managed, his voice rough. "Both would be good." Lily helped him to his feet, surprised by his height. He towered over her, yet leaned on her as if she were the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and uncertain. Together, they made their way to the back door of Rosewood Coffee House, their footsteps echoing in the empty street. Inside, the back room was small but warm, filled with the lingering scent of coffee and freshly baked bread. Lily guided him to an old armchair, its leather cracked but comfortable, then disappeared briefly, returning with a clean towel and a steaming mug. "It's our house blend," she said, placing the mug on a small table beside him. "Strong enough to cut through whatever's drowning you, but smooth enough to be kind about it." He took the towel with trembling hands, and Lily noticed the fine lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the way his shoulders carried an invisible burden. This was a man used to wearing masks, she realized, but tonight, His defenses had crumbled. In the rain. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why help a stranger?" Lily busied herself with adjusting the heater, avoiding his gaze. "Because someone once told me that kindness isn't about deserving. It's about needing. And right now you look like you need it." She glanced at her watch again. 8:52 p.m. "I have to go," she said, gathering her bag. "But you can stay here as long as you need. Just pull the door shut when you leave. It locks automatically." At the doorway, she paused, looking back at the stranger who had somehow found his way into her quiet world. "Whatever happened, tomorrow's another day. Sometimes that's all we need to know." He nodded, clutching the mug like a lifeline, and Lily stepped back into the rain, unaware that she had just offered shelter to Mason Walker, the billionaire whose face would be splashed across every news channel by morning. Unaware that this simple act of kindness would ripple through both their lives like stones cast into still water. As she hurried home through the rain, the word brave on her wrist seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, a reminder that sometimes the bravest things we do are the ones we don't think twice about. The following morning dawned with a reluctant sun breaking through lingering storm clouds. Lily arrived at Rosewood Coffee House earlier than usual, her mind drifting to the stranger she'd left in the back room. She wasn't surprised to find the space empty, just a neatly folded towel on the armchair and the coffee mug washed and placed on the small table. What did surprise her was the origami crane sitting next to the mug, crafted from what appeared to be an expensive business card. She picked it up carefully, noting the precise creases and deliberate folds, a small gesture that spoke volumes about careful hands and a mind that needed something to focus on during sleepless hours. "Earth to Lily," Harper's voice cut through her thoughts as she burst through the door, her red curls contained today by a colorful headband. "You're not going to believe what happened last night. The wedding of the year, complete disaster." She waved her phone, excitedly, nearly knocking over a stack of cups. Lily placed the paper crane carefully in her apron pocket. "What wedding?" "The Walker-Russell wedding. You know, the Hotel Empire heir. Mason Walker left his bride at the altar, just disappeared. No one's seen him since yesterday afternoon." Harper leaned against the counter, scrolling through headlines. "They're saying it could impact the whole company's stock prices. Rich people drama is wild." Before Lily could respond, the morning rush began. Winston-Salem might be a relatively small city, but Rosewood's reputation for exceptional coffee and fresh pastries drew people from all walks of life. As she steamed milk and pulled espresso shots, Lily found her thoughts returning to the stranger from last night. His expensive suit, the quality watch, the air of someone used to a different world, but surely it couldn't be. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 7:30 a.m., and Lily looked up to see him walking in. Gone was the disheveled appearance from the night before, replaced by casual elegance, dark jeans, a gray Henley that brought out his eyes, and a leather jacket that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His blonde hair was neatly styled, though still maintaining that slightly tousled look that spoke of careful carelessness. Their eyes met across the counter, and for a moment, the busy coffee shop faded away. He offered a small, almost imperceptible nod as he approached the register. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice carrying none of last night's slurred edges. "I believe I owe you a proper thank you." Harper, who had been wiping down tables nearby, nearly dropped her cleaning cloth. She stared at him, then at her, phone then back at him, her eyes widening with recognition. Lily felt her heart rate quicken but maintained her composure. "The house blend again? Or would you like to try something different?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I trust your judgment, whatever you recommend." She turned to the espresso machine, grateful for the familiar routine of coffee making. Her mind raced with questions, but she remembered her own words from the night before about not asking any. Behind her, she could hear Harper's barely contained excitement, practically vibrating with the need to speak. "Here," Lily said, presenting him with a carefully crafted cortado. Something balanced, strong enough to face the day, but with a touch of sweetness to remind you that not everything has to be bitter. He accepted the drink, their fingers brushing briefly. You have a way with metaphors. I have a way with coffee, she corrected, trying to ignore the electricity of that momentary contact. The metaphors are just a side effect of too many late-night reading sessions. He took a sip, his eyes closing briefly in appreciation. When they opened again, they held a warmth that transformed his entire face. Would you mind if I stayed for a while? I find myself in need of somewhere quiet. Lily gestured to a small table in the corner, partially hidden by one of the coffee house's many potted plants. That spot's good for thinking, or not thinking, whichever you need more. He settled into the corner table, pulling out a laptop that probably cost more than her car. Throughout the morning, Lily noticed how he would occasionally glance up from his screen, watching the ebb and flow of customers with something like wonder. He seemed particularly fascinated by the regulars, the old couples who shared muffins and finished each other's sentences, the college students with their textbooks spread across tables, the local artists who traded sketches for coffee. During a lull in customers, Harper cornered Lily by the pastry case. That's Mason Walker, she whispered urgently. The Mason Walker, the one who… I know. Lily cut her off, arranging croissants with more attention than necessary. And if he wanted everyone to know he was here, he wouldn't have chosen the quietest corner of a small coffee shop in Winston-Salem. Harper studied her friend's face. You knew last night, didn't you, when you helped him? No, Lily said honestly, her hand unconsciously touching the paper crane in her pocket. Last night, I just saw someone who needed help. That's all that mattered then, and it's all that matters now. The morning stretched into afternoon and Mason remained in his corner, occasionally ordering another coffee or a pastry. He was unfailingly polite to both Lily and Harper, though his eyes seemed to follow Lily more often than not. There was something different about him now, a vulnerability beneath the polished exterior, like a crack in expensive porcelain that made it more interesting, more real. Around 2 o'clock, a group of businessmen entered, their loud voices discussing stock prices and market fluctuations. One of them mentioned the name Walker, and Mason tensed visibly, his fingers drumming an anxious pattern on the table. Without a word, Lily walked over and placed a plate with a warm chocolate chip cookie next to his laptop. When he looked up questioningly, she shrugged. Sometimes sweet things help with bitter moments. No charge. He caught her wrist gently as she turned to leave, his thumb brushing over her brave tattoo. Thank you, he said, and somehow she knew he wasn't talking about the cookie. For last night, for this morning, for… He gestured vaguely at the busy coffee shop. Letting me just be. Lily felt the weight of his gratitude, saw the cost of vulnerability in his eyes. Everyone deserves a safe harbor in a storm, she said simply. Even if they sailed in on a yacht. A genuine laugh escaped him, probably the first in days, and the sound seemed to surprise them both. Lily smiled in response, then returned to work, aware of Harper's knowing looks and the warmth that lingered on her wrist where he had touched her. As closing time approached, Mason packed up his things but hesitated before leaving. He placed an envelope on the counter. For last night's coffee and towel use. Lily pushed it back without opening it. The coffee was on the house, and kindness isn't for sale. Their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them. An understanding, a possibility, a dangerous kind of hope. Mason nodded once, tucking the envelope away. Then perhaps I'll just have to find other ways to repay the kindness. As he walked out into the fading afternoon light, Lily realized she was still holding the paper crane he'd made. Such a delicate thing. Created by hands that were used to holding the weight of empires, she placed it carefully on her windowsill at home that night, next to a small potted succulent. A reminder that sometimes the strongest things can also be the most fragile. Evening settled over Winston-Salem like a soft blanket, bringing with it the kind of quiet that made secrets easier to share. Lily sat beside her grandmother's bed in their modest apartment, gently applying lotion to the older woman's paper-thin hands. Rose Carter had once been a force of nature. Now she was like autumn leaves, beautiful but fragile, each day a little more delicate than the last. "You're humming again," Rose observed, her voice warm with knowing. "That old Elvis song you only hum when something's on your mind." Lily hadn't even realized she was humming "Can't Help Falling in Love." She stopped abruptly, focusing intently on her grandmother's hands. "Just a busy day at work." "Busy doesn't make your eyes sparkle like that," Rose said, squeezing her granddaughter's fingers. "I may be old, dear, but I'm not blind." Before Lily could respond, a light knock at their door interrupted the moment. Harper stood in the hallway, clutching her tablet and wearing an expression that meant trouble. "You need to see this," she said, brushing past Lily into the apartment. She settled onto their worn couch, the one Lily had reupholstered herself last summer, and pulled up a news website. The headline made Lily's heart sink. "Walker heir spotted in North Carolina, exclusive photos." The pictures were grainy but unmistakable. Mason at Rosewood Coffee House sitting at his corner table. In one shot, he was laughing at something off camera, and Lily recognized the moment from earlier that day when she'd made the yacht comment. "They're saying he had some kind of breakdown," Harper continued, scrolling through the article. "The Russell family is threatening to sue for emotional damages, and the Walker Hotel's stock dropped 15% today." Lily sank into the armchair across from Harper, her grandmother's antique timepiece ticking steadily on the wall behind her. "He doesn't seem broken to me," she said quietly. "Lost, maybe, but not broken." "Speaking of your mysterious billionaire," Harper leaned forward, lowering her voice despite Rose being in the other room. "Did you know he's been asking about you?" Lily's head snapped up. "What?" "This morning, while you were picking up supplies, he asked me how long you'd worked at Rosewood, if you'd grown up here." Harper's eyes sparkled with mischief. "He seemed particularly interested in whether you were seeing anyone." "Harper," Lily warned, but her friend wasn't finished. "I may have mentioned that you're single, work too hard, and make the best cinnamon rolls in 3 counties. Harper grinned. He wrote that last part down. Lily threw a cushion at her friend, but her mind was already racing. The thought of Mason asking about her sent a warm flutter through her chest, immediately followed by a cold splash of reality. She glanced down at her simple clothes, the small apartment, thought of her grandmother's mounting medical bills. "It doesn't matter," she said finally. "We're from different worlds." "Honey," Rose called from the bedroom, her voice carrying years of wisdom. "Different worlds are exactly where the best stories begin." The next morning, Mason arrived at his usual time, but something was different. His usual confident stride was replaced by a tighter, more controlled movement. He clutched his phone like it might bite him. "Everything okay?" Lily asked as she prepared his now usual cortado. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of internal turmoil. "My family's lawyers are flying in. Apparently, I need to manage the situation before it gets worse." His laugh was hollow, as if leaving someone at the altar could get any worse. Lily studied him for a moment, then made a decision. "Follow me." She led him through the kitchen to a narrow staircase he hadn't noticed before. It opened onto the coffee house's roof, where a small garden of potted herbs and flowers created an unexpected oasis. String lights crisscrossed overhead, unlit, in the morning sun but promising magic for evening hours. "Sometimes," Lily said, settling onto a weathered bench, "we need to look at things from a different height to see them clearly." Mason sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne mingling with the rosemary and lavender around them. "I've been looking at things from penthouses my whole life. Hasn't helped much." "Then maybe you need to look from somewhere more grounded." She turned to face him. "Why did you do it?" He stared out at the city skyline, his profile sharp against the morning light. "Everyone thinks they know why. The papers are full of theories, cold feet, another woman, business dealings gone wrong." He shook his head. "The truth is both, simpler and more complicated." "I'm good with complicated," Lily said softly. Mason pulled out his father's watch, turning it over in his hands. "Amelia, my ex-fiancée. She had our entire life planned. The wedding, The merger between our family's companies, the house in the Hamptons, the 2.5 kids who'd attend the right schools and marry the right people. His knuckles whitened around the watch. The day before the wedding, I overheard her on the phone with her father. She was laughing about how she'd finally tamed the Walker wild child. And that's when you knew? That's when I admitted what I'd known for months. He looked at Lily, his eyes stormy with emotion. I was marrying her because it was expected, because it made business sense, because it would finally make my family proud. But standing there in that church, all I could think was, this isn't living. This is performing. Lily reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing his arm. So you chose to stop performing. I chose to run, he corrected bitterly. Not very brave of me. Bravery isn't about not being scared, Lily said, unconsciously touching her wrist tattoo. It's about being terrified and moving forward anyway. Mason caught the gesture, his eyes finding her tattoo. Your mother? He asked quietly. Lily nodded, surprised he'd made the connection. She left when I was 12. No note, no goodbye. Just gone. She forced a small smile. I got this to remind myself that surviving abandonment makes you brave, not broken. Is that why you helped me that night? Because you know what it's like to be left? I helped you because you needed help, Lily said simply. The rest, that's just life writing its own story. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the EO city wake up below them. In the distance, church bells chimed the hour and Mason sighed. I should go. The lawyers will be waiting. He stood but hesitated. Lily, thank you. For the roof, for listening, for not trying to tame the wild child, she suggested with a small smile. He laughed, and this time it reached his eyes. For seeing me, just me. As he turned to leave, Lily called after him. Mason, whatever you decide to do about the lawyers, the press, all of it, make sure it's your choice this time. Not your family's, not the company's. Yours. He nodded once, something shifting in his expression. As he disappeared down the stairs, Lily remained on the roof, surrounded by her growing things, wondering when exactly she'd started caring so much about a man who had every reason to disappear from her life as suddenly as he'd entered it. Below, she could hear Harper starting the morning prep, humming that same Elvis song Lily had caught herself humming the night before. Maybe her grandmother was right. Maybe the best stories did start with different worlds colliding. But as she headed back downstairs to start her shift, Lily couldn't help wondering, in those stories, what happened to the people who dared to cross the divide? The lawyers arrived in sleek black cars that looked out of place on Rosewood Coffeehouse's modest street. Through the front windows, Lily watched as 3 men in expensive suits emerged, their polished shoes clicking against the sidewalk. Mason sat at his usual corner table, his posture stiff as a board, the carefree man from the rooftop garden nowhere to be seen. Harper nudged Lily's arm. Those shoes probably cost more than our monthly rent. Their watches cost more than the whole building, Lily murmured, trying to focus on the latte art she was creating. But her hands weren't steady enough and the heart came out looking more like a broken circle. The lawyers settled around Mason's table, their voices low but their presence filling the entire cafe. Regular customers glanced over curiously, smartphones, discreetly appearing to capture photos of the scene. Lily wished she could protect Mason from the publicity, shield him from the prying eyes. But all she could do was keep the coffee flowing and try to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Mr. Walker, one of the lawyers spoke loud enough for his voice to carry, the Russell family is prepared to drop all potential litigation if you make a public statement apologizing for your impulsive behavior. Mason's fingers drummed against the table, his tell when anxiety crept in. And what exactly would this statement entail? A simple acknowledgement of temporary emotional distress, perhaps citing exhaustion from overwork. We'll attribute your actions to stress rather than any reflection on Miss Russell or her family. The press will eat it up, the overworked heir who just needed a break. A break? Mason's voice carried an edge Lily had never heard before. Is that what we're calling it when someone realizes they're about to marry for all the wrong reasons? The eldest lawyer leaned forward, his gold cufflinks catching the morning light. Mason, be reasonable. The company's stock has dropped 20%. Your father is fielding calls from concerned board members. The Russell merger is hanging by a thread. We need to contain this situation. Contain? Mason spat the word like it was poison. That's all anyone ever wants to do with me. Contain, control, manage. Because you're a walker, another lawyer interjected. And walkers have responsibilities. The bell above the door chimed, and all heads turned to see a striking woman enter the coffee house. She wore a designer suit that probably cost more than Lily made in 3 months. Her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon. Even without introduction, Lily knew instantly who she was. Amelia Russell, the woman Mason had left at the altar. The coffee house fell silent. Harper stopped mid-wipe of a table, her cleaning cloth frozen in air. Even the regulars who pretended not to notice the lawyers couldn't help but stare now. Amelia's heels clicked across the floor as she approached Mason's table. "Hello, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold as winter. "You've led us on quite the chase." Mason stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "Amelia, what are you doing here? Trying to salvage what's left of both our reputations." She gestured to an empty chair. "May I?" Before Mason could respond, Lily appeared at the table with a fresh carafe of coffee. "I'm sorry, but that seat's reserved for paying customers." Her voice was professional but firm. "House policy." Amelia's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched. "Excuse me? You want to sit? You'll need to order something." Lily met the other woman's gaze steadily. "We have an excellent bitter brew that might suit your taste." A flash of appreciation crossed Mason's face before he schooled his features. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably, but Amelia's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Very well. Double espresso, no sugar." She turned to Mason. "You always did have a fondness for quaint local establishments." Lily returned moments later with Amelia's espresso, served in their finest china cup, the one Harper's grandmother had donated years ago. "Careful," Lily warned. "It's hot. Wouldn't want anyone to get burned." The warning carried more weight than just coffee temperature, and everyone at the table knew it. "Mason," Amelia began once Lily stepped away, "you've made your point. Whatever crisis you're going through, we can work through it together. The press love a good reconciliation story." "Crisis?" Mason's laugh was hollow. "Is that what you call realizing you've spent your whole life trying to be someone else's version of yourself?" "I call it a moment of weakness," Amelia replied smoothly. "One that we can overcome. Think about it. The prodigal heir returns, humbled but wiser. We'll have a smaller ceremony, more intimate. Your father's already agreed to accelerate the merger as a show of good faith to my family." Mason's hand went to his father's watch, his thumb running over its worn face. "And what about what I want?" "What you want," Amelia's voice sharpened. "What about what you owe? To your family, to mine, to the thousands of employees depending on this merger." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Do you really think you can find whatever you're looking for here, in this?" She glanced around dismissively. "Charming little establishment?" From behind the counter, Lily tried not to listen, tried to focus on her work, but every word carried across the quiet space. She could see Mason's shoulders tense, could feel the weight of expectations crushing down on him. That's when Rose Carter chose to make her entrance. Lily's grandmother stood in the doorway, more steady on her feet than usual, her silver hair catching the morning light. She made her way to the counter and Lily rushed to help her. "Grandma, what are you doing here? You should be resting." Rose patted her granddaughter's cheek. "Can't an old woman want to see where all the excitement is?" Her voice carried clearly through the coffee house. "Besides, I heard someone special was making your eyes sparkle these days." Mason's head turned at that, his eyes finding Lily's across the room. Something passed between them, understanding, possibility, fear. Amelia noticed the exchange, her perfect composure cracking slightly. Mason, darling, you can't seriously be considering throwing everything away for this. She gestured vaguely at the coffee house, at Lily, at the life so different from their world of penthouses and private jets. No, Mason said quietly, standing again. I'm not throwing anything away. He looked at the lawyers, at Amelia, at the life they represented. I'm choosing something real for the first time in my life. He pulled out his wallet, placed several $100 bills on the table. For the coffee, he said, then turned to leave. Mason, Amelia called after him. If you walk away now, there's no coming back. The merger, your position in the company, all of it will be gone. He paused at the door, looking back, not at Amelia, but at Lily. Sometimes, he said, echoing Lily's words from the rooftop. We need to lose everything to find what we're really looking for. The bell chimed as he left, leaving behind a wake of shocked silence. Amelia stood, smoothing her perfect suit, her composure back in place, but her eyes blazing. He'll come to his senses, she announced to no one in particular. He always does. But as she and the lawyers filed out, Lily wasn't so sure. She'd seen something in Mason's eyes in that final look. Not fear or uncertainty, but possibility. The same thing she felt growing in her own heart, despite every rational voice telling her to guard it more carefully. Rose made her way to Mason's abandoned table, picking up one of the $100 bills. Well, she said with a knowing smile, I believe this calls for one of your special cinnamon rolls, dear. Something tells me we haven't seen the last of that young man. Lily took the money from her grandmother's hand, replacing it with a fresh cinnamon roll. Grandma, she said softly, what am I doing? Living, Rose replied simply. Finally, truly living. Outside, rain began to fall again, as it had on that first night when a broken man had found his way to their door. But this time, Lily realized, he wasn't running from something. He was running toward something, and that made all the difference in the world. 3 days passed without any sign of Mason. The media circus outside Rosewood Coffee House gradually dispersed, leaving behind only scattered memories of expensive suits and probing questions. Lily tried to convince herself it was better this way, a clean break before things got too complicated. But every time the bell above the door chimed, her heart jumped a little, hoping. Harper watched her friend with growing concern. You're making that face again? She said one afternoon as Lily absent-mindedly drew figure eights and spilled sugar on the counter. What face? The one that says you're trying really hard not to care about something you care about way too much. Lily brushed the sugar away, forcing herself to focus on restocking the pastry case. The local news played quietly on the old TV mounted in the corner, and she tried not to flinch when Mason's name came up in the business report. The Walker Hotel's stock had stabilized, but rumors of a major restructuring were circulating. Lily began, then stopped, searching for the right words. I just hope he's okay. Honey, Harper said gently, billionaires are generally okay. It's the rest of us you need to worry about. But Lily couldn't shake the memory of that vulnerable man she'd found in the rain, or the way his eyes had looked when he'd chosen to walk away from everything he'd ever known. There was a difference between being okay and being whole. The afternoon lull was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. A tall, distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered the coffee house, his bearing immediately commanding attention. His gray hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccable, and his eyes, the same stormy blue-gray as Mason's, surveyed the space with careful consideration. Mr. Walker, Lily breathed, recognizing Mason's father from news photos. Harper nearly dropped the mug she was drying. Miss Carter? His voice was smooth, cultured, carrying the weight of generations of privilege. Might I have a moment of your time? Lily nodded, gesturing to Mason's usual corner table. As they sat, she noticed how his fingers moved to his own watch, the same nervous tell as his son. I suppose you're wondering why I'm here, he began, declining her offer of coffee with a polite wave. My son has always been impulsive, but this latest episode has surprised even me. With all due respect, sir, Lily said carefully, I don't think leaving the altar was an impulse. I think it was probably the first non-impulsive decision he's made in a long time. Richard Walker's eyebrows rose slightly. You speak quite confidently about a man you've known for less than a week. Sometimes you can know someone's heart without knowing their history. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Mason was 12 when his mother died, he said suddenly, catching Lily off guard. Cancer, quick and brutal. She was everything to him, to both of us. Lily's hand unconsciously moved to her brave tattoo. 12, the same age she'd been when her mother left. After that, Richard continued, I threw myself into the company, building something lasting, something worthy of her memory. I thought if I could make it big enough, strong enough, it would somehow fill the void she left. He paused, his facade cracking slightly. I never realized I was asking Mason to fill that same void with things that couldn't possibly fit. The merger? Lily said softly. The perfect marriage. The perfect life. Richard smiled sadly. But perfection, Miss Carter, is often the enemy of happiness, something I've learned far too late. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Do you know what this is? Lily shook her head. It's Mason's resignation from the Walker Hotels Board, along with a proposal to sell his controlling shares back to the company. He tapped the envelope against the table. He sent it this morning. No discussion, no negotiation, just choosing his own path. I'm sorry, Lily offered, though she wasn't sure if she was apologizing for Mason's decision or for the pain it clearly caused his father. Don't be. Richard's voice softened. For the first time in 20 years, my son sounds like himself again, and I suspect. He glanced around the coffee house, taking in its worn charm and genuine warmth. You had something to do with that. Before Lily could respond, the door chimed again. Mason stood there looking oddly casual in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his hair slightly wind-blown. He froze at the sight of his father. Dad? Richard stood, straightening his suit jacket. Hello, son. We were just discussing your latest career move. Mason moved to stand beside Lily, close enough that she could feel the tension radiating from him. It wasn't up for discussion. No, Richard agreed, surprising them both. It wasn't. He picked up the envelope. I'll have legal process this immediately. Your shares will be transferred and your resignation will be announced at tomorrow's board meeting. Just like that? Just like that. Richard stepped closer to his son. You know, you have her eyes, your mother's. Not just the color, but the way they see right through all the pretense. She would have been proud of you today. Mason's breath caught. Dad, I wasn't there for you after she died. Not really. I built walls of wealth and expectations thinking they would protect you. Instead, he gestured helplessly. They just kept you trapped. The coffee house had emptied out, as if the universe itself was giving this family moment, the space it needed. Harper had disappeared into the kitchen, though Lily suspected she was listening through the door. I don't know what I'm doing, Mason admitted quietly. I just know I can't go back to not being me anymore. Richard nodded, then did something that seemed to surprise even him. He hugged his son. It was brief, awkward with years of emotional distance, but real. Whatever you're looking for, Richard said as he pulled away, I hope you find it. His eyes flickered to Lily. Or perhaps you already have. He turned to leave but paused at the door. Oh, and Mason? Your mother's garden fund, the one she set up for community projects, it's still active. Might be worth looking into. He smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through his professional demeanor. She always did believe that the best things grow in unexpected places. After he left, Mason sank into a chair, looking shell-shocked. Lily quietly prepared him a cortado, adding a touch more milk than usual. Some moments needed extra comfort. You okay? She asked, sitting across from him. I think... Mason took a sip of coffee, gathering his thoughts. I think that's the first real conversation I've had with my father since Mom died. Lily reached across the table, taking his hand. His fingers intertwined with hers naturally, as if they'd been doing this for years instead of days. What happens now? She asked. Mason looked around the coffee house, his eyes lingering on the herb garden visible through the window, the worn but comfortable chairs, the way afternoon light painted everything in shades of gold. Now, he said, squeezing her hand, I learn how to be me. Not Mason Walker the heir, not Mason Walker the runaway groom. Just Mason. And who was that? He smiled, and it reached all the way to his storm-colored eyes. I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. Maybe. He hesitated, vulnerability creeping into his voice. Maybe with someone who's brave enough to see me even when I couldn't see myself. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Through the kitchen door, they could hear Harper humming that Elvis song again, and somewhere in the distance, church bells marked the hour. Two worlds, Lily thought, didn't have to collide to come together. Sometimes they just had to find the right space in between, a space that looked remarkably like an old coffee house at twilight, where broken pieces could find their way to becoming something whole again. Early morning light filtered through the rooftop garden's herbs, casting dappled shadows across Mason's face as he studied the worn business plan spread out before him. Lily sat cross-legged beside him on their usual bench, nervously watching his expression as he read. Your grandmother wrote this? He asked, running his finger along the faded margins filled with Rose's elegant handwriting. 25 years ago. Lily plucked a sprig of lavender, rolling it between her fingers. Before she got sick, she always dreamed of turning Rosewood into something bigger. Not just a coffee house, but a real community space. Classes, events, a proper garden cafe. She gestured to the modest rooftop garden around them. This was supposed to be just the beginning. Mason nodded, his eyes scanning the detailed notes about community programs and sustainable business practices. She was ahead of her time. These concepts, local sourcing, educational workshops, green spaces, they're exactly what people are looking for now. Yeah, well, dreams don't pay medical bills, Lily said softly, the weight of responsibility evident in her voice. 2 weeks had passed since Richard Walker's visit, 2 weeks of quiet mornings and gentle discoveries. Mason had traded his designer suits for casual clothes, his corporate meetings for hours spent learning the art of coffee making from Lily. She'd caught him studying the ancient espresso machine with the same intensity he once reserved for business reports. What if they could? Mason said suddenly, straightening up. Pay the bills, I mean, and fund the dreams. Lily gave him a wary look. Mason, hear me out. He shifted to face her, that familiar spark of excitement in his eyes. My mother's garden fund. It was set up specifically for community development projects exactly like this. I can't take your family's money. It wouldn't be my family's money, he corrected. It would be a proper business investment through a legitimate foundation. One that my mother created specifically to help places like Rosewood grow. Lily stood, moving to the garden's edge to look out over the awakening city. The morning sun caught her hair, turning the brown curls to warm honey. And what happens when people find out? The media would have a field day. Runaway billionaire. Fund small-town barista's business. Mason followed her to the railing, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. First, I'm not a billionaire anymore. The share transfer went through yesterday. I'm just a guy with some savings and a trust fund I've barely touched. He smiled. Second, who says they have to know it's me? The foundation has dozens of projects. This would just be one more. And third? Third? He turned to face her, his expression serious. I'm not doing this for the small-town barista. I'm doing this for the woman who saw me when I was invisible, who offered kindness without asking for anything in return, who makes me want to be better, do better. Lily felt her heart skip at the intensity in his voice. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd carefully danced around the growing tension between them, both aware of how new and fragile this thing was. Mason, she began, but he gently caught her hand. Just think about it. Look over the paperwork. Talk to Harper and Rose. Make the decision that's right for Rosewood. Before she could respond, Harper burst through the roof access door, her red curls wild with excitement. You two need to see this. They followed her downstairs to find Rose in the coffee house, more animated than she'd been in months. She sat at Mason's usual corner table surrounded by old photo albums and blueprints. I found them, she announced triumphantly. All the original plans, every detail I dreamed up. She looked at Mason with knowing eyes, including some ideas your mother helped me with. Mason froze. What? Rose patted the chair beside her. Elizabeth Walker. She used to come here whenever she was in town for hospital treatments. Said our coffee was the only thing that made chemotherapy bearable. She pulled out a faded photograph that showed a younger Rose with a beautiful woman who had Mason's eyes. We spent hours talking about gardens and community and making spaces where people could heal. Mason sank into the chair, taking the photo with trembling hands. I never knew. She didn't want you to, Rose said gently. She said this was her secret paradise away from hospitals and worried faces. She helped me plan all this. She gestured to the blueprints, said someday it would grow into something beautiful. Lily watched as Mason traced his mother's face. In the photograph, saw the pieces of his past realigning themselves into new patterns. The garden fund, he said quietly. She set it up right after this, didn't she? Rose nodded. She wanted to make sure places like this could always find a way to grow. Harper, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly clapped her hands. Okay, universe, we get it. This is clearly meant to be. Harper, Lily warned, but her friend was unstoppable. No, think about it. Mason's mom literally helped plan this. The foundation exists specifically for this purpose. And let's be honest, this place needs more than just a fresh coat of paint. She gestured to the water stain on the ceiling, the creaky floorboards, the ancient equipment. Rose reached out and took Lily's hand. Sweetheart, I've spent years watching you put everyone else's needs first. Maybe it's time to let someone help your dreams grow too. Lily looked around the coffee house, at the worn chairs that had held countless conversations, the counter where she'd learned to make her first latte, the window where Mason's paper crane still sat beside her succulent. This place was more than just a business, it was home. Okay, she said finally, show me the paperwork. But, she pointed at Mason, we do this right. Everything legitimate, everything transparent. Everything above board, he agreed, his smile, brighter than the morning sun streaming through the windows. I already have some ideas for the garden expansion. Of course you do, Lily laughed, then grew serious. Mason, thank you. Not just for this, but for understanding why this place matters. He stood, carefully placing his mother's photo back in Rose's album. Thank you for showing me what matters. He hesitated, then added softly, Mom would have loved seeing what this place becomes. Well, Harper announced, pulling out her tablet. If we're doing this, we're doing it big. I've been sketching some design ideas and let me tell you the Instagram potential alone. As Harper launched into her vision for the future Rosewood, Lily caught Mason's eye across the table. He was looking at her with an expression that made her heart race, like she was something precious and rare, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Outside, the morning crowd was beginning to gather. Soon the coffee house would fill with the usual symphony of espresso machines and conversation. But for now, in this moment between night and day, between past and future, 4 people sat around a table full of old dreams and new possibilities. And in the window the paper crane caught the morning light, its wings seeming to quiver with anticipation of flight. The renovation plans for Rosewood spread across the coffee house's largest table, weighted down by coffee cups and Mason's father's watch. Lily traced her finger along the architect's rendering of the expanded rooftop garden, trying to reconcile her modest dreams with the elegant design before her. It's too much, she said, looking up at Mason. The glass greenhouse, the spiral staircase, the teaching kitchen. It's beautiful, but it's not rosewood. Mason leaned against the counter, sleeves rolled up and a smudge of coffee grounds on, his cheek from his morning training session with Harper. Over the past week, he'd insisted on learning every aspect of the business, from grinding beans to managing inventory. What if it could be? He asked. Not losing what makes this place special, but giving it room to become everything it was meant to be? Before Lily could respond, the door chimed. A woman in a crisp business suit entered, her tablet held like a shield. Mr. Walker, Olivia Chen, from the Historical District Commission. Mason straightened, professional instincts kicking in despite his casual appearance. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. The commission has some concerns about your proposed renovations, she said, pulling up documents on her tablet. This building is part of Winston-Salem's historic downtown district. Any changes must preserve its architectural integrity. Lily's heart sank. They'd spent weeks planning, dreaming, carefully balancing ambition with authenticity. Now it felt like the ground was shifting beneath their feet. The plans maintain the original facade, Mason began, but Olivia cut him off. The rooftop additions would be visible from street level, altering the historic skyline. Additionally, we have questions about the funding sources. She glanced meaningfully at Mason, given recent media attention. Harper, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop while wiping down tables, dropped all pretense. The funding is completely legitimate. We have all the paperwork from the Walker Garden Foundation. Yes, Olivia said carefully. A foundation that hasn't funded any major projects in over a decade, suddenly taking interest in a small coffee house where Mason Walker happened to seek refuge after his highly publicized wedding incident. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mason's fingers found his father's watch, his tell more pronounced than ever. My mother started that foundation, he said quietly, to help places exactly like this grow. The timing might seem convenient to you, but I assure you, everything about this project is genuine. Nevertheless, Olivia continued, the commission requires additional documentation and community impact studies before we can approve any structural changes. Rose chose that moment to make her entrance, moving slowly but deliberately toward the group. Young lady, she said, her voice carrying the weight of years. Do you know why this building has survived so long? Olivia blinked, caught off guard. I assume because of the preservation codes. Because it's always been a place of gathering, Rose corrected. Through wars, depressions, social changes, this building has adapted while keeping its heart. First as a general store, then a bookshop, now a coffee house. She gestured to the walls around them. History isn't just about preserving bricks, it's about preserving purpose. Lily watched as Rose pulled out the photo album they'd discovered the week before, showing Olivia pictures of the building through the decades. Each image showed people coming together, finding community within these walls. The greenhouse we want to build, Rose continued, it's not just for show. It's for teaching children about growing food, for providing fresh herbs to local restaurants, for giving people a green space in the heart of the city. She turned to a particular photo, the one of her with Elizabeth Walker. Some dreams take time to grow, but that doesn't make them any less worthy of blooming. Olivia studied the photographs, her professional facade softening slightly. These are remarkable historical documents in themselves. She looked up at Mason. If you could provide a detailed preservation plan showing how the renovations would honor the building's legacy while serving the community. We'll have it on your desk first thing Monday, Mason promised. After Olivia left, Lily sank into a chair, the morning's tension catching up with her. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe we're trying to do too much, too fast. Mason knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Hey, look at me. Do you remember what you said to me that first night? About kindness not being about deserving, but about needing? She nodded. Well, this community needs what Rosewood could become. Your grandmother's right. This place has always been about bringing people together. We're not changing that. We're just giving it more room to do what it does best. You sound like you really believe in this, Lily said softly. I believe in you, he replied, then quickly added, in this, in what we're building here. The almost confession hung in the air between them, electric with possibility. Harper, who had been unsuccessfully pretending to organize coffee beans, nearby, let out an audible sigh. Oh my God, just kiss already, she muttered, loud enough for them to hear. Lily felt her cheeks flush, but before she could respond, the door chimed again. This time, a familiar figure in expensive designer wear stood in the doorway. Well? Amelia Russell said, surveying the scene with calculated interest. Isn't this cozy? The prodigal heir playing barista in his little investment project? Mason stood slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of Lily. What do you want, Amelia? Can't a person check on an old friend? She moved further into the coffee house, her presence somehow making the space feel smaller, especially when that friend is about to make a very public mistake. There's nothing public about this, Mason said firmly. The Foundation's involvement is completely legitimate. Oh, darling. Amelia's laugh was like crystal breaking. Everything about you is public now, and when the press finds out you're using your mother's foundation to fund your little coffee shop romance. She let the implication hang. Lily stood, her voice steady despite her racing heart. We're not doing anything wrong. No? Amelia raised a perfect eyebrow. The commission's already asking questions. How long before others start wondering about the convenient timing? The potential conflicts of interest? The personal relationships involved? She turned to Mason. Your father may have accepted your resignation, but the board still cares about the Walker name. Are you really willing to risk everything, including this charming establishment's reputation, for what? A small-town fantasy? That's enough. Rose's voice cut through the tension like a blade. I think you should leave. Amelia smiled, all perfect teeth and practiced charm. Of course. I just thought someone should warn you. She looked directly at Lily. Dreams are lovely things, dear. Until they become nightmares. After she left, silence filled the coffee house. Harper moved to lock the door, flipping the sign to closed despite the early hour. Mason ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. I'm sorry. I never meant to bring all this complication into your life. Lily touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. Hey, what was it you said about believing in what we're building? He turned to her, his eyes stormy with emotion. Lily, if this gets messy, then we'll clean it up, she said firmly. Together. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Outside, rain began to fall, just like that first night. But this time, neither of them was lost or alone. Rose watched them from her seat, a knowing smile playing on her lips. You know, she said casually, sometimes the best way to deal with thorns is to grow something beautiful right alongside them. Harper snorted. Or we could just make Amelia's life miserable by succeeding spectacularly. She paused, then added, with a grin, while looking fabulous doing it. The tension broke, laughter filling the space where fear had tried to take root. Mason's hand found Lily's, their fingers intertwining naturally. So, he said, turning back to the renovation plans, about that greenhouse. And just like that, they were planning again, dreaming again, growing something new in the face of opposition. Because sometimes, Lily realized, the best response to those who try to clip your wings is to simply spread them wider and fly anyway. The headlines exploded across every major news outlet by morning. Walker heirs secret coffeehouse investment. Raises eyebrows. The story had everything. Money, romance, small-town charm twisted into scandal. Somehow the press had obtained documents from the Historical District Commission, including photos of Mason and Lily together at Rosewood. Mason paced the length of the coffeehouse, his phone buzzing incessantly with calls from reporters and old business contacts. The morning rain pounded against the windows, matching his dark mood. We need to get ahead of this, Harper insisted, scrolling through the coverage on her tablet. Look, they're painting it like some sort of shady financial scheme. Sources close to the Russell family suggest potential misuse of foundation funds. She looked up at Mason. 3 guesses who those sources are. Lily sat at the counter staring at the mounting pile of messages from the Historical Commission. Their preliminary approval was now under review. The community impact presentation they'd worked so hard on was scheduled for that afternoon, but now it felt tainted by suspicion. Maybe, she said quietly, we should pause everything, just until this dies down. Mason stopped pacing. No, that's exactly what they want. For us to back down, to admit there's something to hide. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. We've done nothing wrong, haven't we? Lily turned to face him, her green eyes troubled. You changed your whole life, walked away from everything, and now you're pouring money and time into this place. She hesitated. Into whatever. This is between us. How is that not going to look suspicious? Before Mason could respond, the door chimed. Richard Walker stood there impeccable despite the rain, holding a thick folder. Actually, he said, stepping inside, I might be able to help with that. He placed the folder on the counter. Elizabeth's journals, all of them, from her last few years. He looked at Rose. Including her entries about this place, about the plans you made together. Rose moved forward eagerly, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were dozens of handwritten notebooks, filled with Elizabeth Walker's elegant script. Mason leaned over his grandmother's shoulder, seeing his mother's words for the first time in 20 years. Rose's coffee house feels more like home than any luxury hotel, he read aloud, his voice catching. We spend hours planning what it could become, a sanctuary in the city, a place where anyone can grow something beautiful. Today we sketched out the rooftop garden. Rose understands that sometimes the best medicine isn't found in hospitals, but in having somewhere to heal, to dream, to belong. Lily watched as Mason's hands shook slightly, touching his mother's. Handwriting. Richard placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. The foundation wasn't just some tax write-off, Richard explained. It was Elizabeth's legacy. She wanted to create spaces that could do what this place did for her, offer comfort, community, hope. He turned to Lily. The fact that my son found his way here, that he sees the same potential she did, that's not suspicious. That's destiny. A crash of thunder punctuated his words, making everyone jump. Harper, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly straightened. That's it, she exclaimed. The presentation. We don't just show them renovation plans, we show them this. The history, the connection, the way everything came full circle. You think the commission will care about old journals? Lily asked. They'll care about the story, Mason said, understanding dawning in his eyes. About preserving not just the building, but the vision that's been waiting 20 years to bloom. Rose was already pulling out specific journal entries, her experienced teacher's mind organizing them into a narrative. Elizabeth wrote about sustainable urban gardens, about creating gathering spaces that could evolve with their communities. Everything we're proposing, she and I dreamed at first. The door chimed again and Olivia Chen from the commission stepped in, shaking rain from her umbrella. I hope I'm not too early for the presentation, but given the morning's news... Actually, Lily said, standing straighter, your timing is perfect. She gestured to the journals spread across the counter. We have something new to show you. The next hour unfolded like a story being remembered rather than told. Rose read from Elizabeth's journals while Mason and Lily showed how each modern renovation plan connected to those original dreams. Harper pulled up before and after mock-ups on her tablet, demonstrating how the proposed changes would enhance rather than alter the building's historic character. The greenhouse, Mason explained, pointing to his mother's sketches. She designed it to mirror the original glass transom windows. The spiral staircase follows the same curve as the building's 1920s architectural details. Everything new grows from something that was already here. Olivia moved through the documents with growing interest. pausing at a particular entry. A building is only as historic as its ability to keep serving its community. She read aloud. Your mother wrote that? She believed that preservation wasn't about keeping things frozen in time, Richard added. It was about helping them grow in the right direction. Outside, the storm was beginning to clear, sending rays of sunlight through the old windows. They caught the copper fixtures Harper had spent weeks polishing, creating halos of warm light across the historical photographs now arranged on the walls. Well, Olivia said finally, closing her notebook, I think the commission needs to see all of this. The connection between past and present, the community vision. She smiled slightly. It's not often we get to preserve a dream in progress. After she left, promising to expedite their review, the tension in the room finally broke. Harper immediately started planning a social media campaign to share the real story before the press could spin it further. Rose and Richard became absorbed in the journals, sharing memories of Elizabeth. Lily found Mason standing by the window, watching the sun break through the clouds. Hey, she said softly. You okay? He turned to her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. I kept asking myself why I ended up here that night. Out of all the places I could have collapsed, why your doorstep? Just lucky, I guess, she tried to joke, but her voice wavered. Mason took her hand, his thumb brushing over her brave tattoo. Or maybe I was following a path my mother left for me, to the exact place I needed to find, to the exact person I needed to meet. The air between them felt charged, heavy with everything still unsaid. Around them, the coffee house hummed with activity. Harper's excited planning, Rose and Richard's quiet conversation, the familiar whir of the espresso machine. Mason, Lily began, but he shook his head. I know there's still the media storm to weather, and the commission's final approval to get, and probably a dozen other obstacles we haven't even seen yet. His eyes held hers, intense and certain. But standing here, in this place, that helped both our mothers heal in different ways, I need you to know something. Lily's heart thundered in her chest. What? That every step I've taken since that rainy night, leaving the company, fighting for these renovations, all of it, they weren't steps away from my old life. They were steps toward you. The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable, and real. Outside, the storm had fully cleared, leaving behind a sky washed clean and new. And in that moment, surrounded by history and hope and possibility, Lily realized that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself believe in the kind of love that feels like coming home. The Historical Commission's approval came on, the same morning that Rose collapsed. One moment she was sharing Elizabeth's journals with a group of eager architecture students who'd come to document Rosewood's renovation plans. The next, she was crumpling to the floor, papers scattering like autumn leaves. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Lily sat rigid in an uncomfortable chair, her clothes still dusted with the day's coffee grounds. Mason hadn't left her side since the ambulance arrived, his hand steady around hers. She's strong, he kept saying, though his voice carried an edge of fear they both recognized. They'd seen too many loved ones in hospitals not to know how quickly things could change. Harper paced nearby, her vibrant hair pulled back in a messy bun, her usually perfect makeup smudged from worried tears. The doctor said it was just exhaustion, right? Too much excitement with the renovation plans and everything? Before Lily could respond, rapid clicking of heels announced Amelia's arrival. She strode into the waiting room like she owned it, followed by two men in expensive suits. Mason, she said, her voice carrying false sympathy. I came as soon as I heard. This must be so difficult, especially with the Foundation's review meeting tomorrow morning. Lily felt Mason tense beside her. What are you talking about? Oh, you haven't heard? Amelia's perfectly manicured hand touched her chest in feigned surprise. The Walker Foundation Board called an emergency meeting to review all recent funding approvals. Something about ensuring proper protocols were followed. She glanced meaningfully at Lily, particularly in cases where personal relationships might have influenced decisions. You did this. Mason stood, his voice low and dangerous. You pushed for this review. I'm simply looking out for your mother's legacy, Amelia replied smoothly. After all, what would she think about her foundation being used to fund your romantic rehabilitation? Don't you dare speak about my mother. Mason's hands clenched into fists. You have no idea what she would have wanted. Actually, one of the suited men stepped forward. As a member of the foundation's legal team, I can tell you exactly what she wanted. The bylaws specifically prohibit board members, which you still are, Mason, from directing funds to projects where they have a personal stake. I didn't direct anything, Mason argued. The application went through all proper channels. After you personally delivered it, the lawyer raised an eyebrow. After you've been photographed practically living at this establishment, dating its owner? We're not. Lily started to protest, but Amelia cut her off. Save it, dear. The optics are what they are, and right now they're threatening everything the foundation stands for. Harper stepped forward, fury radiating from every inch of her small frame. Everything it stands for, like helping communities grow, creating spaces for people to heal, because that's exactly what we're doing. Noble intentions. Amelia smiled coldly. Don't excuse ethical breaches. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Miss Carter, your grandmother's asking for you. Lily stood on shaky legs. Mason moved to follow, but Amelia's lawyer blocked his path. Mason, the board meets at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If you want to save the foundation's reputation and protect this little coffee house from a very public scandal, you'll be there, with a full withdrawal of the funding application. Or what? Mason challenged. Or we'll be forced to launch a formal investigation into potential misuse of foundation resources. One that would put every aspect of this project, and everyone involved, under microscopic scrutiny. Lily turned back from the doorway, her heart breaking at the sight of Mason trapped between impossible choices. Again, because of her. Go, he said softly, meeting her eyes. Be with Rose. I'll handle this. The hospital room was dim and quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Rose lay against white pillows, looking smaller and more fragile than Lily had ever seen her, but her eyes were clear and sharp as ever. You're thinking too loud, Rose said, patting the bed beside her. Sit. Tell me what's happening out there. Lily perched carefully on the edge of the bed, trying to keep her voice steady as she explained about Amelia, the foundation review, the threats of investigation. And now Mason has to choose, she finished, tears finally spilling over. Between his mother's foundation and you? Rose reached up to wipe her granddaughter's cheek. Oh, sweetheart. When will you learn that love isn't about choosing between things? It's about choosing what's right even when it hurts. I don't want him to lose anything else because of me. Because of you? Rose's voice strengthened with indignation. Lily Marie Carter. That man found himself because of you, found his way back to his father, found his mother's dreams, found purpose beyond bank accounts and boardrooms. She squeezed Lily's hand. Sometimes love costs us things, but the real measure isn't what we lose, it's what we become. Before Lily could respond, commotion erupted in the hallway. She heard Mason's raised voice, then Richard Walker's distinctive tone cutting through the chaos. Stepping into the hall, she found father and son facing off against Amelia and her lawyers. The board meeting is canceled, Richard announced, his authority filling the space. As acting chairman of the Walker Foundation, I'm ordering a full audit of all funding practices over the past 5 years. He turned to Amelia with steel in his eyes, including several interesting approvals during your time as a board member. Amelia's perfect composure cracked. You can't. I can, and I am. Elizabeth's foundation will continue funding projects that align with her vision. Projects exactly like Rosewood. He softened his voice. The coffee house that gave her peace during her hardest days, that's now giving our son the chance to build something real. The bylaws, one lawyer began, but Richard cut him off. State that board members cannot direct funds to personal projects. Mason didn't direct anything. I did. Because I recognized in Rosewood exactly what my wife saw all those years ago, a place where broken things can become whole again. Mason stared at his father, understanding dawning. You knew? About Mom coming here? I followed her once, Richard admitted, worried about where she was spending her good days between treatments. Found her sitting with Rose, planning gardens and futures. He smiled sadly. It was the happiest I'd seen her in months. Amelia's heels clicked against the linoleum as she backed away. This isn't over. Actually, Harper's voice rang out as she held up her phone. It is, because I just live-streamed this whole conversation to Rosewood's 20,000 Instagram followers, complete with your threats and Richard's revelations about the foundation. She grinned fiercely. I think the public can decide for themselves what Elizabeth Walker would have wanted for her legacy. After Amelia and her lawyers retreated, after Richard went to handle damage control, after Harper finally stopped vibrating with triumphant energy, Lily found herself alone with Mason in the quiet hospital hallway. I'm sorry, they both said simultaneously, then laughed despite everything. What are you sorry for? Mason asked, stepping closer. For complicating your life. For making you choose. For... Stop. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch impossibly gentle. You didn't make me choose anything. You showed me who I could be if I was brave enough to choose myself. The word brave hung between them, heavy with meaning. Down the hall they could hear Rose's steady monitors, Harper's excited chatter, the ordinary symphony of hospital life continuing around their extraordinary moment. Mason, Lily whispered, I'm scared. Of what? Of believing in this. In us. In happy endings that don't get taken away. He pressed his forehead to hers, sharing the same breath, the same space, the same truth. Then be scared with me, he said softly. Be brave with me. Be real with me. Just be with me. And there, in a fluorescent-lit hospital hallway that smelled of antiseptic and hope, Lily finally stopped fighting the current that had been pulling them together since that first rainy night. Sometimes, she realized, the bravest thing you can do is let yourself fall. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through Rosewood's new glass ceiling, casting prism-scattered light across the expanded cafe space. The renovation had transformed the old coffeehouse while somehow preserving its soul, modern touches blending seamlessly with historic charm, just as Elizabeth and Rose had envisioned decades ago. Lily stood in the center of the rooftop greenhouse, surrounded by herbs and flowering plants that seemed to reach for the sky. The spiral staircase, approved after 3 rounds of historical commission reviews, curved elegantly behind her, its wrought iron design echoing the building's original architecture. The lavender's especially happy this morning, Rose observed from her comfortable new perch by the greenhouse windows. Her health had improved steadily over the past months, her strength returning along with Rosewood's transformation. The doctors called it a miracle. Harper called it the power of having something to live for. Everything's happy this morning, Lily replied, running her fingers along the fresh herbs. Today marked not just the official grand reopening of Rosewood, but the launch of their community programs, cooking classes, gardening workshops, and a partnership with local schools to teach sustainable urban farming. Harper burst through the greenhouse door, her red curls adorned with tiny flowers. The camera crew's here and you will not believe who's covering the story. She practically bounced with excitement. National Morning Show. They're calling it The Billionaire and the Barista, a story of love and legacy. Lily groaned. That's terrible. That's trending, Harper corrected with a grin. Besides, wait until they see what we've done with the place. The Historical Society's already talking about making us a landmark destination. The sound of footsteps on the spiral staircase drew their attention. Mason appeared, looking more at home in jeans and a rosewood apron than he ever had in designer suits. 6 months of working alongside Lily had given him calluses on his hands and peace in his eyes. Dad's here, he announced. With Mom's journals. He thought. He paused, emotion catching in his throat. He thought they should be part of the library display. The new reading nook had been Mason's idea, a cozy corner filled with books about gardening, sustainability, and local history. Elizabeth's journals would join Rose's original business plans, their shared dreams finally available for others to discover. Perfect timing, Harper declared. The morning show wants to start with the historical connection, full circle, moment and all that. Speaking of full circle, Mason said, pulling something from his apron pocket, look what I found while cleaning out the old storage room. In his palm lay the original paper crane he'd made that first morning after Lily found him in the rain. The expensive business card had faded, but the creases remained sharp, as if holding on to the memory of that moment. You kept it? Lily asked softly. Actually, Rose interjected with a knowing smile, I did. Tucked it away the day after he left. Something told me it was going to be important to the story. Before anyone could respond, Richard's voice carried up from below. They're ready when you are. Harper immediately switched into event coordinator mode. Okay, places everyone. Rose, you're perfect right there by the herbs. Mason, Lily, maybe by the railing. The city view behind you is gorgeous this morning, but Mason caught Lily's hand before she could move. Wait, there's something I need to say first. Her heart skipped at the serious note in his voice. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's... He looked around at the thriving greenhouse, at Rose beaming from her chair, at Harper pretending not to eavesdrop while adjusting flower arrangements. Everything's finally right. Because of you. Because you offered shelter to a stranger in the rain. Because you saw me when I was invisible. Because you taught me that real love isn't about grand gestures or social expectations. It's about showing up day after day and choosing to grow together. Lily felt tears threatening. Mason. He dropped to one knee and the greenhouse seemed to hold its breath. From his pocket he drew not a ring box but the worn key to Rosewood's front door, the one she'd used to let him in that first night. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said, holding up the key. Not yet. We've both had enough of rushing into things we're not ready for. His eyes held hers, stormy blue-gray meeting forest green. I'm asking you to keep building this dream with me, to keep teaching me about coffee and kindness and courage, to keep showing me that the best things in life grow slowly, with patience and care and love. Harper had given up all pretense of not watching, her phone discreetly recording the moment. Rose dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The night you found me, Mason continued. I was lost in every way possible, but you didn't try to fix me. You just gave me space to find my way back to myself. And somehow, that path led right here, to this place, to these people, to you. Lily knelt beside him, taking the key in trembling fingers. You know I already have a key to Rosewood, right? Mason laughed, the sound pure and free. Yeah, well, I never claimed to be smooth. I just claim to be yours, if you'll have me. I had you the moment you walked in that door, Lily whispered, then kissed him. The greenhouse erupted in cheers, not just from Harper and Rose, but from the entire Rosewood staff who had gathered on the spiral staircase to witness the moment. Richard stood at the bottom, one hand resting on Elizabeth's journals, his eyes suspiciously bright. When they finally broke apart, the morning sun had reached its full strength, turning the greenhouse into a cathedral of light and growing things. Below, they could hear the first customers arriving for the grand reopening, the familiar symphony of coffee grinding and conversations beginning. Ready to face the cameras? Harper asked, her own cheeks wet with happy tears. Lily looked at Mason, at their families, both born and chosen, at the dream they'd built together from the scattered pieces of their broken pasts. Actually, she said, can we have just one more minute? They stood at the greenhouse railing, looking out over the city where their story began. The paper crane sat on the ledge beside them, its wings catching the light. You know what I think? Lily said softly. What's that? I think your mom and my grandmother knew exactly what they were doing when they planned this place. They knew that someday, someone would need the kind of shelter that only grows from love. Mason wrapped his arms around her, and together they watched the city wake up below them. The morning show crew was setting up cameras. Early customers were discovering the newly renovated space, and somewhere in the distance church bells marked the hour. "You still haven't given me an answer," he murmured against her hair. Lily turned in his arms, touching the brave tattoo on her wrist, the marking that had once reminded her of abandonment but now spoke of new beginnings. "Yes," she said, simply. "To building dreams with you, to growing together, to finding home in the most unexpected places. Yes to all of it." And as they descended the spiral staircase to greet their waiting audience, Lily realized that some stories don't end with happily ever after. The best ones end with something truer, with two people choosing each other every day, with dreams taking root in fertile soil, with love that grows like wildflowers through the cracks in our broken places. Up in the greenhouse, the paper, Crane kept its vigil, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things begin with a single act of kindness on a rainy night. And in the library corner below, Elizabeth's journals sat beside Rose's plans, their shared vision finally blooming into reality. Because some dreams, like the best kinds of love, just need time and tenderness to grow. 1 year later, the evening, light filtered through Rosewood's greenhouse, casting long shadows across the tables where families gathered for the cafe's popular Sunday community dinner. The scent of fresh herbs mingled with coffee and laughter, creating the kind of atmosphere that couldn't be designed, only grown. Lily moved between the tables, her wedding ring catching the light as she refilled water glasses. She still wore her apron, now emblazoned with the cafe's new logo, a paper crane surrounded by flowering vines designed by Harper's expanding creative agency. At the central table, Rose held court, teaching a group of children how to fold their own paper cranes while sharing stories about the building's history. Her health had stabilized, strengthened by purpose and joy. Beside her, Richard Walker helped a small girl with her creases, his corporate persona long since softened by Sunday dinners and grandparent duties. "Hey, stranger." Mason's voice came from behind as he wrapped his arms around Lily's waist. His hands still carried traces of garden soil from the afternoon's planting session. The rooftop garden had expanded to 3 neighboring buildings, creating an urban farming network that supplied fresh produce to local restaurants and food banks. "Stranger?" Lily laughed, leaning back against him. "We've been married for 3 months, and I still can't believe my luck." He kissed her temple, "Though I'm pretty sure Harper's already planning our first anniversary party." As if summoned, Harper burst through the greenhouse door, her red curls now streaked with silver and gold. "You two are needed downstairs. The journalism students are here for the documentary interview." The cafe's story had become a case study in sustainable urban development and community restoration. Architecture students still came to study the seamless blend of historical preservation and modern innovation, while business schools analyzed their unique social enterprise model. But more importantly, Rosewood had become exactly what Elizabeth and Rose had dreamed, a sanctuary where anyone could find shelter, grow roots, and bloom. "1 second," Lily said, moving to the small library corner where Elizabeth's journals were displayed. She opened the most recent edition, a leather-bound book where visitors shared their own stories of finding home at Rosewood. Mason watched as she wrote, "Love isn't just about the big moments, the rainy nights that change everything, the proposals in gardens, the wedding days. It's about the small choices, making coffee together at dawn, planting tomorrow's herbs, sharing strength when the other feels weak. It's about growing something beautiful from wherever you're planted. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's about finding someone who sees you exactly as you are and loves you enough to help you become who you're meant to be." Lily and Mason Walker, caretakers of dreams. Outside, the sun set over Winston-Salem, painting the sky in shades of promise. Inside Rosewood, stories continued to unfold, in coffee cups and garden beds, in paper cranes and gentle hands, in the countless ways love finds to grow wild and free. Because the best endings are really just beginnings in disguise. And this story, it was still growing. If you found yourself at a crossroads like Mason, Having to choose between the life others expect from you and the unexpected path your heart desires, what would you do? Would you have the courage to leave everything behind for a chance at authentic happiness, or would you stay in your comfort zone? Like Lily's brave tattoo reminds us, sometimes the bravest choice isn't the easiest one. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.